Hello. Welcome to part 2 of our first episode of DNA Hardwired, Common Sense Turned Upside Down. My name is Pop, and with me is my co-host, Nikki.
Hello.
Hopefully you had an opportunity to listen to part 1 of this first episode on Common Sense so that you will understand how this program works and be current on part 1 of the current episode 1, Common Sense. In part 1 of the current episode on Common Sense, we discussed the definition of common sense, the different groups involved with common sense, whether common sense was the same as logic, why aren't all situations or facts agreed upon by all people except babies and those with mental health conditions, different reasons why we all don't agree on all things from a common sense point of view. Where's the line between real life and common sense? Is perception or belief true reality or fact? And we also talked about the concept of thinking it through. What are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts or feedback on the first session, the last session?
Yes, I do. I want to say that I've been thinking over the last week since our last episode of how people may interpret or have thoughts or comments about our first episode on common sense, and just, the reason why we're doing these series on common sense. And I thought about it, and I wanted to preface that I think, again, people sometimes have thoughts that are more emotional, or based on things that really necessarily aren't common sense. And so I really want to move forward in the way of, when we discuss and hear different topics, kind of step back from a common sense aspect, not from a political affiliation or religious affiliation, a gender affiliation or race affiliation, but just really step back and be able to see, does this make common sense or does it not make common sense? And so we're not here, again, like I said in our first episode, to try to have people turn to be a Democrat or turn to Republican or the Green Party, Independent or Christian or Buddhist. What we're really trying to do is just get people to think about common sense, and do we use common sense in everyday life? And so again, this podcast is not to have people be swayed one way or the other. It's really for us just to be able to step back and see if we are moving forward in our everyday life using good old common sense. So with that being said,
All right. All sounds good, and I second that. We didn't receive any comments or feedback on part 1 of this episode. But I have been talking to people individually about it. And I have a friend from my gym who was actually born and grew up in Saudi Arabia. We talked about the podcast on common sense, and we got into how one's culture, religion, and other factors can affect the way common sense can look in different cultures. After a rather lengthy conversation with him in the gym, we were supposed to be working out, but we in there talking, I became even more convinced that common sense can be culture specific. Some cultures don't even have a word or words for common sense. It was a very informative and interesting conversation, I must say.
that sounds pretty good. You should be in there working out, but that's for another podcast. We'll talk about fitness. I don't know how much common sense is it to go to the gym and not work out, but that's for another day. So give me some examples of a different culture take on common sense that we may have here in America versus Saudi Arabia, for example.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's interesting because we did talk about some areas that might be a little different. And one of them was in the area of dating and marriage, which we're going to cover. I think that's going to be our next episode, major episode is going to be on dating and marriage. But some specific differences between common sense dating in America versus common sense dating in Saudi Arabia are. For one, approximately 65% of dating in Saudi Arabia is generally for the purpose of marriage, and those marriages are often arranged by the family. A public display of affection are rare. You don't normally see hugging, kissing, or holding hands. Those situations are typically reserved for private spaces, even among married couples. Many couples may not be permitted to see each other alone. Premarital sexual relationships are illegal and considered immoral. Unmarried couples are not allowed to live together. So, those are just some cultural differences from the dating and marriage standpoint from between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Wow, that's really a difference. How we have things here from a cultural perspective. We can cohabitate.
Yeah.
We can show public displays of affection, and again, like you had said, that comes from a cultural, maybe a religious kind of aspect as well. Versus like it's not necessarily common sense one way or the other, but how culture has impacted our daily behaviors. What is the relationship of instinct to common sense? I mean, what's that relationship then like? What does that look like?
Well, instinct is basically the natural tendency or way that a person or animal must behave, think, feel, or react in a particular way that is not learned. Okay? It's not learned. Common sense is something that is learned, and we have the ability to build on. And as we develop and grow, our common sense will grow and develop with us, hopefully.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I appreciate you going into a little bit more depth between that. So, what are some reasons people's common sense doesn't appear to develop and, grow fully?
Now, that's a really good question. Again, you're very smart.
I am.
Normally you have good questions.
Yes, I do.
Well, excluding mental health conditions, one main reason is lack of life experiences. Common sense often comes with age and life experiences. Someone who has not had many life experiences may not have had the opportunity to learn and fully develop common sense. That's one of the reasons adults appear to generally, now notice I said appear to generally have more common sense than kids and younger adults. Of course, there are some instances where this is not the case. Another reason for one's common sense not growing and developing fully is a lack of education. And we're going to be covering education a couple in the future, a couple episodes in the future. Some people may not have received a thorough education, which can lead to a lack of common sense. Education enhances common sense by providing individuals with the knowledge and critical thinking skills to make informed decisions and navigate complex situations. Again, we'll be covering education in a future episode. Question for you. Do you think you can improve your common sense? And if so, what are some ways?
I do think that we can improve our common sense. We can learn from our past experiences and learn from our mistakes. So I think putting your hand on the stove, some people might say, hey, the stove eye looks red, but you go ahead and put your finger on there anyways. And maybe common sense wasn't working that day, but you touched it. So for the future, common sense may say, hey, that stove eye is red. Let me not touch it again. So I do believe from our past mistakes, we can move forward and use some good old common sense. I think we can consider potential consequences before making decisions. Think it through. Again, with, the stove looks hot, the oven looks hot. Let's not touch it. So past consequences can, help us think things through. We can broaden our knowledge across various subjects like science, psychology, and math to understand causes and effects of relationship in everyday life. We can use common sense is useful in solving everyday problems. Common sense sometimes fails us when it comes to large issues of politics and planning involving many factors and complex situations. And lastly, but not least, we can read the book DNA Hardwired, a pocket guide on common sense, and listening to the podcast DNA Hardwired, Common Sense Turned Upside Down. I think by doing some of these steps, it can definitely help improve your common sense. And I think by listening to our elders or people that we think have led their life in a pretty good way, we can enhance our common sense as well. So surround ourselves with people that appear to have used good common sense throughout their life. So those are just some things that I think we can use good common sense and learn.
And they all sound great, and I'm confident that those tips will be very helpful in us improving our common sense. Okay, I think this was a great topic, and hopefully we were able to provide people with some basic information and knowledge to help to better be able to understand others and our lack of common sense at times. Also, it might help us to improve our application of common sense. You know, it's been said that it is 1,000 times better to have common sense without education than to have education without common sense. Now think on that. Let me repeat that for those in the back. It has been said that it is 1,000 times better to have common sense without education than to have education without common sense. Do you have any closing thoughts on common sense?
Well, before I get into that, I want to go back to reading that. It has been said that it is 1,000 times better to have common sense without education than to have education without common sense. And the reason why I kind of want to expound on that, and I know we're going to be doing a topic specifically on education, but I don't know who said that, but that's a brilliant statement. And I think my grandmother, 99, she's going to be 100, God willing, on the 21st of this month, she's going to be 100 years old. She lives independently, and I think that this quote speaks to her. She did not graduate from high school and did not get her GED. So not a lot of formal education, I would say. But I think that she has and had a lot of common sense along the way that has allowed her to live to 100 independently. The only thing that I would say that's a deficit is hearing. And I think sometimes she actually likes that. So she doesn't have to hear people talking to her. So she has hearing aids, but she'll take them out sometimes. But other than that, I think she may be on 1 or 2 medications. So again, this is coming from a person who did not have a lot of formal education, did not graduate from high school, but she has been able to live into 100 years of age, God willing, in a few weeks, based on common sense. She's able to live independently, financially independently. And I think that this goes a long way with how common sense is more important in my mind than having formal education. And so I think some people may argue with that, but I see a lot of people that have education that do not appear to have common sense, and a lot of people that do not have formal education that seem they're doing pretty well in their life. So I wanted to comment on that quote that you have. But in my closing thoughts and comments on common sense, again, I think that common sense is definitely influenced by a lot of various factors. And I think we can increase our level of common sense through life, and hopefully the longer we live, the better our common sense skills are. And I am hopeful that, again, through being around people that seem like their life is, doing pretty well, maybe taking some, I do believe education can definitely help, taking some classes, reading some books. I definitely think that our common sense can definitely, for sure, be increased. And again, I know I keep reiterating this, but I think sometimes when certain subjects matters are brought up, people don't use just good common sense. Hear out the facts, take out your emotions, just hear what it is and see, is this good common sense? Am I getting so upset? Is that good common sense to get upset about, things that are purely based on facts and data? I think that common sense should outrule how we emotionally want to react, and that we should be able to say, does this make good common sense by doing this or doing that? And I think that we will be better as a country, better as a world, and just in our individual lives, if we can just lean a little bit more on common sense and not be so reactive, and really think some things through. So those are just some of my thoughts on common sense. But as we continue with our podcast, I'm sure I'll grow with more common sense and have more to say on common sense. But those are just some thoughts that I have on common sense.
Okay, and they all sound good. And I think the story that you told about your grandmother was an excellent example of that quote that I referenced. And on the other side of that quote, there are a lot of people with education who don't appear to have a whole lot of common sense, and that kind of ties into my closing thoughts. And I want to cover some current events. And one of the current events really illustrates starkly how there are some folks who are educated but don't seem to apply a whole lot of common sense.
Before you go into that, Pop, can we name this something? What should we name this area? Hot tops? What should we name it? What's a good kind of thing, this area that we're going into?
Well, I like current events.
Okay, current events.
Yeah,
Okay, current events.
What we'll try to do at the end of our sessions, we'll try to touch on some current events.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I think one of the events that's major in our society today is the recent election of President Donald Trump. I find it so interesting and conflicting to my thoughts on common sense that Donald Trump got reelected as president. I mean, consider the fact that his first term, he was impeached twice while in office. First time that's ever happened, as far as I know. First time in our history. In 2024, prior to the election, by the way, in 2024, U.S. News and World Report ranked Donald J. Trump as the worst U.S. president in history. Now, this is prior to the election. And we've got a lot of educated people who decided that it would still be smart to elect Donald J. Trump to a second term after this ranking. He actually incited an insurrection, which is basically to overthrow our government. But he incited an insurrection after losing his bid for re-election in 2020. Again, these same educated people, knowing this fact, decided it would be a good idea to still re-elect him as the president of, without a doubt, the best country in the world. We decide to re-elect him as president. Like I say, common sense, I'm having a problem with that. He became the first former president to be convicted of felony crimes, 34 to be exact. Again, we had some educated American citizens, voters, who were aware of that fact, and they still felt that it would be a smart decision to elect this person as president of the United States of America. He was found guilty of sexual abuse. Sexual abuse. He was found guilty. There was no rumors, innuendos, okay? He actually was tried and he was convicted of sexual abuse. We had a COVID epidemic a few years back when he was president. He actually suggested that we should inject disinfectant in order to deter the effects of COVID. He suggested that to the American people. There is much, much more, but that wasn't even enough to persuade American voters that they maybe it didn't make much common sense to reelect him as president. So, if that wasn't enough. Any thoughts?
Well, I'm not going to comment too much on your comments. I think you brought up some good facts and how people interpret those facts, or what they do. But again, I think that you just listed facts based on information that a person can do a Google search on. Again, the intent of this podcast is not to persuade people one way or the other. But I think that you just brought up facts, and people, need to determine, what they did. But I think that you had stated that people did make a determination of what they wanted to do when they wanted to vote. So my only comment on that is, hey, those were the facts, and this is what we did.
Yeah. Well, can you think of some? Now he's been in office a few weeks. I talked about some things that he had done in the past.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those are past things.
Yeah.
Forgive us.
And
God forgives us.
I don't know your political affiliation or anything like that, but are you aware of anything since he's been in office? Have you noticed anything that would raise your eyebrows from a common sense standpoint that he's done or suggested while he's been in office the last few weeks?
So these are just some things that, I have my little Apple phone and little things pop up, news headlines. So this is just news. This isn't any type of social media type of thing, one way or the other. But these are some things that have kind of popped up. And I have seen, and I know you're more of a news junkie than me. CNN and MSN, and you might even delve into Fox. Who knows? So, but I know you're
trying to be balanced.
Yeah, you try to be balanced.
I try to be balanced.
That's the best way is to be, because we're using, what are we using?
Common sense.
Common sense. So we're trying to be balanced. But these are just some things that it seems like it's come across so far. Looks like there has been a freeze on federal hiring. It does look like, from my understanding, there was some promised tariffs on some of our trade partners, specifically Canada and Mexico and China. Some people might have a problem, with some of these countries if they're considered partners, but these are just some examples of some tariffs that were going to be placed, whatever you feel about that.
Those tariffs, I don't know if people know that. But those tariffs, they're going to affect us.
That's not common sense. I don't believe you. That don't make common sense.
Yeah. That
makes no sense. I don't know.
That's the problem.
I don't know.
Our president told us before we hit that button to vote for him that he had planned on applying these tariffs to these countries. And we were told that we were going to end up paying for those tariffs. In the end, no matter what he said, we were told that we were going to end up paying those tariffs, and we still voted for him.
These are just some topics, okay? These are just some things that are going on.
Don't get me riled up.
I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. We pulled out of the Paris Agreement and the WHO, which is the World Health Organization.
He.
Well, okay, okay, you got me. It looked like there were some pardons for hundreds of people who stormed the U.S. Capitol during the insurrection.
Tried to overthrow the government.
Well, I mean,
some people got hurt. Some of our law enforcement people got hurt.
Things happen. Things happen. I don't, things happen. Give them a break.
I heard it was just a friendly, what do they call it? When you go to sightsee, it was just a tour.
Oh, a tour. Okay.
Yeah, I had heard something about that. And then I also heard that it was like just a few people. It really wasn't that many people that actually broke into the Capitol.
It seems like you're doing some judgment here. We're just trying to base stuff on common sense.
Well, I'm basing this on facts.
Oh, okay.
And so you need to, at times, apply some facts in order to, apply a good level of
healthy level of common sense. Okay. Because I think we all fall short of the grace of God, in my opinion. So, but I'm just reading facts. I'm just reading facts.
Yes, let's stick to the facts.
Let's stick to the facts again. We are talking about facts and common sense, and we're not one way or the other. However you feel.
That's right.
It looks like he renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. So there's going to have to be a little bit of some switching around some things as far as like Google Maps.
Well, exactly. And my understanding, and there's going to be some confusion because a lot of the countries, they're not going with that. They're still going to refer to it.
Now that doesn't make common sense. We all got to be on the same page.
It doesn't make sense at all. Not really.
Okay.
But that's my understanding.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see how things play out. And then there has been some questionable, unqualified appointments. So those are just some things, again, questionable. You question, wherever you hang out on that is where you kind of shake out on that. But those are just some things that have been going on in the news. Yeah.
There's more, but this episode really wasn't intended to be on politics because we're going to cover politics in a later episode. But for current events, we felt that we at least needed to. Oh, I forgot one other thing, too.
Okay.
This thing, I think they call it DEI. What does that stand for?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, from my understanding.
I have to tell you, I try to keep up, like you said. I listen to Fox and CNN.
Oh, yeah.
I try to keep up.
Yes, you do.
I try to be informed because I have my older daughter. She keeps checking me.
Yes.
So, but I have to admit, this term DEI, I'd never heard this term, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm an old fella. But I had heard this term DEI for the first time, probably within the last 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
I had never heard that term before.
Have you heard of affirmative action before?
I've heard of affirmative action.
Okay.
Yep. I've heard of a lot of other programs, policies, laws that were designed to kind of help folks who, like people that may be handicapped.
Okay.
Those types of things, who may have challenges, certain health condition challenges. But I never heard of DEI. And so I did a little research on that term.
Okay.
Because what's happened, the reason I'm talking about this is that he has just gutted this DEI program. And I hate to call it a program because it's really not a program in and of itself.
I think it falls under the umbrella of like affirmative action type of thing.
Yeah. It's more of an umbrella. It's over an umbrella over all of these programs that's designed to help people, who may otherwise not be able to get a job or access to different types of things.
Okay.
So he is basically from the federal government standpoint, and he's also influenced certain parts of the civilian entity also.
Okay.
To do away with
Okay.
Diversity.
Okay.
What's that?
Equity,
and what else?
Inclusion. Okay.
Now, again, from a common sense standpoint, we're talking about America and we're talking about American citizens. Why would we want to not help out
veterans, disabled veterans?
What you talking about?
Yeah, disabled veterans, people that may have mental or physical challenges.
Why do we not want to help those people out?
I do not. I mean, because that's being inclusive, right? So
yes.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Diversity, I don't understand.
Yes. From a common sense standpoint, I from a humanitarian standpoint, from an American standpoint, I do not understand the purpose of gutting the umbrella, which is DEI, the umbrella for all of these programs. I don't understand it. And I didn't mean to go off.
Yeah, you went off a little bit.
I didn't.
You went off a little bit on tangent. But the only comment I have, the word I'm going to focus it on is equity. And I think people sometimes think equity means the same thing as equal, and it doesn't. Equity, let me just leave this closing thought. What equity is if I'm able to walk up some stairs or a ladder, or walk, just walk on a plain surface, but I'm able to walk to certain places. But someone may be in a wheelchair, so someone may have, it may be a permanent situation or maybe a temporary situation, to where they are unable to walk, ambulate, freely. What equity would look like in that situation is that you may have a ramp for people, or you may have an elevator for people, or some other type of means for them to be able to get to the same place. So equity means that we can both get to the same place. I need to get into the store. They need to get in the store. So I'm able to walk freely, and they may need
all that. All that sounds great.
Okay.
But in America today, and this is part of the problem.
Okay.
In America today, when you start to use the word diversity.
Okay.
What's that other word?
Equity.
Equity.
Inclusion.
Okay. What picture do a lot of Americans see? Do they see that person in the wheelchair? Do they see that person as of a certain race? Do you or sex or gender or when you talk about veterans and you say DEI or affirmative act, who do these people?
We're gonna leave that question open-ended.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave it open-ended.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So maybe what'll happen is maybe we'll get some of the listeners to fill in and give us some feedback
what they
on
think
that.
DEI
Yes.
a person may look like, or qualities
We
that
won't
they may
tell them.
We'll
we'll let them apply their common sense.
Yeah.
And tell us who they see or who they think a lot of people see.
Yes.
These Americans who decided to elect Donald J. Trump, knowing who he was and knowing what he said he was going to do, and he's followed through, and he's done those very things, and he continues to.
He's a man of his word.
He's a man of his word. He's a man of his word. So all I can say on that, and we're going to have to close out. But all I can say on that is strap in. It looks like it's going to be a long,
fun ride, fun, adventurous
for some
ride.
Of us. And I have to tell you, some of the people that thought that this was going to be a smooth ride for them, but it might be a rocky ride for others. No, you better strap in too, because we all in this together, and we're going to see. Matter of fact, no, I'm not going to get into that because we got to close out.
Okay, we got to close out.
But anyway, that's a wrap. Again, please let us know your thoughts by leaving your comments and thoughts at, now this is one word, DNA Hardwired Podcast at gmail.com. Let me repeat that. You can leave your comments at DNA Hardwired Podcast at gmail.com. Or Facebook. We actually have a page on Facebook. It's DNA Hardwired, a podcast on common sense. So, any last words? I mean, final.
Enjoy your life. I lean on the Lord, and just peace out.
Peace out. All right, then. This is Pop and Nikki dropping the mic on this episode. So we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Think it through, people.